Joining us now from the nation's capital, Toronto Centre MP Bob Rae, who, as chair of the Forum of Federations in 2002-03, helped oversee constitutional discussions between the government of Sri Lanka and the Tamil Tiger rebels. Mr. Rae, good to see you again. Thanks for coming on the program.
Thank you, Steve. Good to see you.
Just before we start chatting, I'd like to, because this is a part of the world that a lot of our viewers may not know that much about, put up a map and go through a kind of a fact list here of a bit of Sri Lankan history. For example, it is just 30 kilometers off the southeast coast of India. It is the former British colony of Ceylon. Population there, about 20 million people. The Civil War began in earnest in 1983. The key belligerents are the Sri Lankan Army, the SLA, and the LTTE, Liberation Tigers of Tamil Eelam. 70,000 killed in the fighting so far. Here's where I bring you in to go through some of the background. In terms of the differences, culturally, religiously, language, between the Sinhalese and the Tamils, what are the biggest differences?
Well, the Sinhalese are the majority. They're Buddhists. And it's important to remember that while they are the majority in Sri Lanka, there's still a sort of a sense among the Sinhalese population that they are a minority in the whole sort of Indian subcontinent, if you look at it in that way. It's important to understand that because they see themselves as a minority and argue very strongly that's why they need protection for their traditions, their language, and their customs on the island. The minority population is Tamil. They are Hindus. You will know that there's an Indian state province just across the strait called Tamil Nadu, which has got a very large Tamil population, in fact, a huge Tamil population. But within the country of Sri Lanka, the Tamil population is a minority. Now, to further complicate matters, there are lots of other people there. There are essentially two groups of Tamils. There's what we call the Jaffna Tamils, who are the people who've been there for the longest time, literally hundreds and hundreds of years. And then there are the Tamils who came over to pick tea in the 19th century, who were brought over by the British and who live sort of in the south, and they have their own particular area, the tea country, but that's a different area. There's a very strong Muslim population, about 8 to 10%. There's quite a substantial Christian population, again about 7 or 8%. It's a very interesting, fascinating, beautiful, and now, of course, as we realize, deeply troubled place. And
based on your experience with the area, what would you say are the main grievances that the Tamil community has as a result of being a minority on that island?
Well, it's almost a classic situation. There are many parallels with other parts of the world. The British came in at the beginning of the 19th century. The East India Company, other things were sort of taking over the Indian subcontinent, and the British moved in. The Dutch had been there before. And the British came in and established colonial rule. It took them quite a while to kind of get it organized as a colony. And they saw the Tamils as people who were more urban, more literate, and under the British rule, the Tamils essentially did, if you like, the Jaffna Tamils did better, proportionately. There were more of them in the civil service. There were more of them who were teachers and professionals. You had a long-standing debate going on during British rule about what kind of governance and local government there should be. There was an independence movement in Sri Lanka, as there was in India, and in the independence movement, the Sinhala majority was there, and they saw independence in part as a way for them to express their personality and for them to express their status on the island. And so when independence came in 1947, that's when things began to change a bit more, and the Sinhala majority began to sort of feel its oats and take a stronger position. And over time, without getting too complicated about it, over time there were many incidents and instances and areas where Tamils felt that they were being excluded or they were being cut out. the Tamils began to feel more and more that they were living on the margins of what they considered to be their own country.
And eventually, in the 1970s, the Tamil Tigers are created. What specifically led to that?
Well, the kind of the trigger for the creation of the Tamil Tigers and a number of other in guerrilla groups. The Tigers were not the only ones at the beginning. They pretty well are now, because they've effectively killed off everybody else, but in terms of within the Tamil population who were leading other movements. But the thing that triggered it, interestingly enough, was the fact that the government decided that there were proportionately too many Tamils getting into university. So they had to get higher grades in order to get in. There was a quota system, which created a tremendous sense of discrimination among the Tamils. Essentially, that was a big issue. The other big issue was the national language. There was little recognition of the Tamil language as an official language, and of course the question of what are the symbols of the country. How is the country being governed? Is it being governed as a partnership, or as a devolved country, or is it being highly centralized and controlled by the majority? And frankly, it was highly centralized and increasingly controlled by the majority, in which Buddhism became the only official religion, in which all the national symbols, the flag, the national song, and so on, were Sinhala symbols. So this increasingly became seen as an issue of nationhood. There was a long argument about, can we have a federation? Because the Tamil population is, if you look at the island, I don't know if the map's on your screen, but if you look at the island, it's Jaffna, which is at the very top of the country, and then moves over through the north and the east of the country, which is where most of the historic Tamil population has been.
1983, things go to a new level. What happened then?
Well, that's the time of real, almost, we would consider it to be like a pogrom, where there was like a Kristallnacht kind of event where many Tamils were killed. It's widely written about, widely discussed events. And that's when we began to see a large number of Tamil refugees coming to Canada and going to the UK and other places, and a sense in the Tamil population that not only were they not able to make a living as easily, and not only were they discriminated against in the public service, but that their lives were at risk. At the same time, the Tamil Tigers, under the leadership of Prabhakaran, who's their leader, and as far as we know is still alive, though it's very hard to tell, but he does. There's no indication that he isn't. Became much more like a very radical guerrilla army, and frankly, the Tamil Tigers reinvented suicide bombing. I mean, they brought it back from hundreds and hundreds of years of not being used, but they created this kind of a cult of so-called black tigers, men and women, usually very young, who are sent into different places to carry out assassinations or to disrupt civilian life, and the conflict sort of grew through the 80s and 90s and became very difficult, very militant, very brutal, very bloody.